"You're going to love this surprise," Evelyn had said, her tone unusually bright. The words echoed in Dylan's head as he weaved through the evening traffic. The conversation played over and over, each replay gnawing at him. Evelyn wasn't one for surprises. She wasn't one for luxury either. Yet here he was, heading to one of the most expensive restaurants in the city at her insistence. He loosened his tie slightly, the anticipation turning into a weight pressing against his chest. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was Alex, their 17-year-old son. "You good, Dad?" Alex asked. "You seemed kind of distracted earlier." "I'm fine, buddy," Dylan replied, forcing a steadiness into his voice. "Your mom wanted to meet tonight. Something about a surprise." "A surprise?" "Huh. Well, let me know how it goes," Alex said before hanging up. Dylan sighed, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Alex's skepticism mirrored his own. Something wasn't right. The restaurant was an opulent spectacle. Chandeliers cast golden light over polished tables, and the scent of seared steak and aged wine lingered in the air. Dylan stepped inside, scanning the room. There, in a secluded corner, Evelyn waved at him, her smile wide and unfamiliar. She looked radiant, almost like the Evelyn he'd met 25 years ago. Her hair was styled differently, and her dress was far too elaborate for her usual taste. Then he noticed the man sitting across from her. "Jeff!" Dylan froze, his heart slamming against his ribs. Jeff's presence didn't make sense. They hadn't spoken much in months, not since Jeff started acting evasive about catching up. Evelyn waved again, her expression unchanged, as if everything were perfectly normal. Dylan forced himself forward, each step heavy and reluctant. By the time he reached the table, the tight knot in his stomach had twisted into something sharper. "Evelyn." "Jeff," he said, his voice strained. He looked between them, hoping for an explanation. "Dylan," Evelyn said, her smile widening. She gestured to the empty chair. "Sit down. We have something important to discuss." Jeff leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug grin plastered on his face. Dylan sat, glancing between them. Evelyn reached into her purse and pulled out a thick stack of papers. She dropped them onto the table with a loud slap. "Surprise," she said, her tone mockingly cheerful. Dylan stared at the papers, his confusion deepening. He picked them up and began to skim the top page. His breath caught when the word divorce jumped out at him. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low and hoarse. "Divorce papers," Evelyn said matter-of-factly, leaning back in her chair. "I thought it was time we made things official." Dylan blinked, struggling to process her words. "Official?" "Evelyn, what are you talking about? What's going on here?" Jeff chuckled, the sound grating. "She's saying she's done, Dylan. It's not that complicated." Dylan turned to Jeff, his jaw tightening. "Why are you even here? This is between me and my wife." "Actually," Evelyn interjected, "it's between all three of us. Jeff and we've been together for over a year now." The words hit Dylan like a physical blow. He stared at her, his mind racing. "A year," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Evelyn, we've been married for 23 years. We have a family. How could you do this?" Evelyn shrugged, her expression unrepentant. "People change, Dylan. You've become predictable, boring. Jeff gives me excitement, ambition, things you lost a long time ago." Dylan's chest tightened. "We built a life together. A home. A family. You're just throwing it all away." "I'm not throwing anything away," Evelyn said, her tone clipped. "I'm moving on, and you can keep the kids. I don't have the time or energy for them anymore." Dylan's stomach churned at her casual dismissal of their children. His hands balled in a fist as he tried to keep his anger in check. "You're unbelievable," he said, shaking his head. "What about our savings? The house?" Evelyn smirked. "I moved everything we saved into my personal account. The house? That's up for negotiation. But honestly, Dylan, you'll figure it out. You're resourceful." Jeff leaned forward, his grin widening. "Look at it this way, buddy. You're free now. No more nagging. No more drama. Sounds like a win to me." Dylan's fists clenched under the table. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in his throat. "You're both disgusting," he finally managed, his voice trembling with rage. Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Spare me the theatrics, Dylan. This is happening. Jeff and I are leaving tomorrow for a romantic honeymoon. You'll get the details from my lawyer. Oh, and by the way, don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's over." She stood, smoothing her dress as if this were a casual dinner date. Jeff rose with her, throwing a few bills on the table for their drinks. "Take care, Dylan," Jeff said with a smirk as he wrapped an arm around Evelyn's waist. Dylan sat frozen as they walked away, laughing together like they hadn't just ripped his world apart. The stack of papers sat in front of him, stark and cold. The restaurant buzzed around him, oblivious to the devastation he felt. For a moment, he considered chasing after them, demanding answers, yelling, screaming, but what would it accomplish? They didn't care. They never had. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him out of his stupor. It was Riley. He answered, his voice breaking. "Dad? Are you okay? You sound weird." Dylan hesitated, glancing down at the papers. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just something came up. I'll be home soon." He hung up and sat in silence, his mind racing. The betrayal, the cruelty, it was all too much. He felt anger bubbling up, threatening to spill over, but he pushed it down. There would be time for that later. For now, he had to get home. Evelyn thought she'd won, that she could walk away unscathed. But as Dylan stood and gathered the papers, a single thought took root in his mind. This isn't over. Dylan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills in front of him. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Alex and Riley were in their rooms, pretending to focus on homework. He knew better. They were just as shaken as he was. The events of the past week replayed in his head on a loop. Evelyn's cruel smirk, Jeff's smug chuckle, the papers she'd thrown at him like they were meaningless, and the words, "I moved everything we saved into my personal account." The sound of Riley's footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. She padded into the kitchen, her oversized hoodie nearly swallowing her small frame. "Dad," she said softly, pulling out a chair. "Are you okay?" Dylan looked at her, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just figuring out some things." Riley frowned. "It's okay to not be fine, you know." He sighed, running a hand over his face. "I know, but I need to be fine for you and Alex. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Riley nodded, though the worry didn't leave her eyes. She hesitated, then reached out and squeezed his hand. "We're here for you, Dad." The following days were a blur of survival. Dylan balanced work and home life with mechanical precision, but the house felt emptier without Evelyn. Not because he missed her, he didn't. It was the gaping hole of betrayal that lingered, infecting every corner of his mind. Alex tried to step up, helping with Riley and taking on chores without being asked. But one evening, as Dylan walked past Alex's room, he heard the muffled sound of something breaking. "Alex?" Dylan knocked on the door. "What's going on?" Alex opened the door, his face red with frustration. A shattered video game controller lay on the floor. "I'm fine," Alex muttered, avoiding Dylan's gaze. Dylan stepped into the room. "You don't look fine. Talk to me." Alex hesitated before blurting out, "I hate her, Dad. I hate what she did to us. To you. How could she just leave? Like we're nothing to her?" Dylan felt a pang of guilt. He wanted to shield his kids from the worst of it, but there was no escaping the fallout. "I don't have all the answers, Alex. But what she did, that's on her, not on us. We're going to be okay. I promise." Alex scoffed. "How?" "She took everything. You're barely sleeping. Riley's scared. And me? I just want to hit something." Dylan put a hand on Alex's shoulder. "I know it's hard, but we're not going to let her break us. We've still got each other, and that's more than enough." Nights were the hardest for Dylan. Sleep eluded him as his mind replayed Evelyn's betrayal. He sat in the living room, staring at the ceiling, the darkness around him feeling suffocating. "You're just a boring loser." Evelyn's words echoed in his head. He thought of all the sacrifices he'd made for her and the kids. The nights he worked overtime to make ends meet. The vacations he postponed so they could pay for the house. The dreams he set aside to build a life together. And for what? To be discarded like yesterday's trash. The rage simmered beneath the surface. Dylan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. This wasn't how his life was supposed to go. He had done everything right. He had been a good husband, a good father. And still, it wasn't enough for her. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. His thoughts raced, a chaotic swirl of anger and pain. Then, amidst the turmoil, a single thought crystallized. This isn't over. The next morning, Dylan sat at the breakfast table with Riley, who was eating cereal and scrolling through her phone. Alex was already off to school. "What are you reading?" Dylan asked, trying to make conversation. "Just some stuff about managing stress," Riley said without looking up. "You should try it." Dylan chuckled softly. "Is it that obvious?" Riley put her phone down and gave him a pointed look. "You barely eat, you barely sleep, and you stare at the walls a lot." "Yeah, it's obvious." Dylan sighed. "I'm sorry, sophomore. I didn't mean for you to worry." "You don't have to apologize," she said quickly. "Just maybe don't keep everything bottled up. It's okay to let us help, you know." Dylan nodded, his chest tightening. He didn't want to burden his kids with his pain, but Riley was right. They were in this together. After dropping Riley off at school, Dylan sat in his car for a while, staring at the dashboard. He needed to pull himself together for his kids, for himself. But he also needed to make sense of what had happened. He thought about calling Evelyn, demanding answers, but the idea made his stomach turn. He had nothing to say to her that would change what she had done. Instead, he decided to focus on what he could control. At work, Dylan buried himself in tasks, but his co-workers noticed the change in him. During lunch, his colleague Valentina approached him. "You've been quiet lately," she said, sitting across from him. "Everything okay?" Dylan hesitated before answering. "My wife left me. Took everything." Valentina's eyes widened. "Dylan, I'm so sorry." "That's awful." He shrugged, trying to downplay it. "It is what it is. Just trying to figure out what's next. If you ever need to talk, I'm here," Valentina offered. "Thanks," Dylan said, appreciating the gesture, but unsure if he was ready to open up. That evening, Dylan sat down with a notebook. He started listing everything he needed to sort out. Bills, custody, the house. But as he wrote, another list began to take shape. A list of everything Evelyn had taken from him. Their savings, their stability, his peace of mind. He stared at the second list, his grip tightening on the pen. He couldn't let her win. Not like this. The kids were upstairs when he picked up his phone and made a call. "Hello, this is Sam," a voice answered. "Sam, it's Dylan. I need your help," he said, his voice steady. Sam, an old friend and a lawyer, listened as Dylan explained everything. "You're saying she emptied the joint account without your knowledge? That's grounds for legal action," Sam said. "We'll fight this, Dylan. She's not getting away with it." Dylan hung up feeling a spark of hope. For the first time in days, he felt like he had a plan. Over the next few weeks, Dylan began to rebuild. He worked with Sam to take legal action against Evelyn and started attending therapy sessions to process the betrayal. He focused on being there for Alex and Riley, making sure they felt supported. One night, as they sat down for dinner, Alex spoke up. "You seem better, Dad," he said, looking at Dylan. Dylan smiled. "I am. It's going to take time, but we're going to be okay. I promise." Riley grinned. "I told you managing stress works." They laughed together, the sound filling the house with warmth. For the first time in weeks, Dylan felt like he could breathe again. As he cleared the table after dinner, he glanced at the notebook on the counter. The words "This isn't over" were scrawled across the top of one page. He picked it up and added another line underneath. "We're just getting started." Dylan sat at his desk late into the night, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face. On the screen was a spreadsheet, his lifeline to revenge. Each row was meticulously labeled with details about Evelyn and Jeff's actions. Suspicious financial moves, Jeff's business dealings, and Evelyn's spending habits. The more he uncovered, the more his resolve hardened. "You think I'm a loser?" Dylan muttered to himself, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's see who's laughing when this is over." The next morning, Dylan called his old friend Tony, a private investigator who had once helped him track down a missing client at work. "Tony, I need a favor," Dylan said, skipping pleasantries. "Dylan? Long time. What's going on?" "It's personal. I need you to dig into two people, Evelyn and Jeff." Tony paused. Your wife in? Who's Jeff? The guy she left me for, Dylan replied tersely. I want everything, affairs, finances, skeletons in the closet. Whatever you can find. Tony's voice softened. You sure about this, Dylan? This kind of digging can get messy. Messy already started when they blindsided me. Just find me what I need. Tony's first report arrived within days, and Dylan pored over every detail. Jeff, the so-called successful entrepreneur, was nothing more than a con man with a string of failed businesses and unpaid debts. His current project, a luxury resort deal, was teetering on the edge of collapse, held together by false promises to investors. But the real kicker came when Tony unearthed Jeff's string of affairs, stretching back years. A cheater cheating with a cheater, Dylan muttered, shaking his head. How poetic. Meanwhile, Evelyn wasn't faring much better. Dylan's quiet financial savvy over the years had left him with a small but significant ownership stake in a tech company that Jeff desperately needed to acquire for his resort project. Without those shares, the deal would fall through, and Jeff would face bankruptcy. Dylan leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Checkmate. He didn't rush into action. Revenge, Dylan knew, required patience. He spent weeks consulting with his lawyer friend Sam, refining his strategy. One evening, as they sat in Sam's office, Dylan outlined his plan. So, you're going to block Jeff's acquisition, Sam said, leaning back in his chair. That's good, but it's just financial. Are you sure it's enough? Oh, there's more, Dylan said, his tone sharp. I'm not just stopping the deal. I'm exposing him for the fraud he is. Sam raised an eyebrow. And Evelyn? Dylan's expression darkened. She wanted freedom so badly? She can have it. Without Jeff, without me, and without a dime. Sam let out a low whistle. Remind me not to get on your bad side. To execute his plan, Dylan needed more information. He started attending networking events where Jeff was known to schmooze, carefully blending into the crowd. One night, he overheard Jeff bragging about his upcoming deal to a group of investors. This resort is going to redefine luxury, Jeff said, holding a glass of expensive scotch. The profits? Astronomical. You're going to want a piece of this pie. Dylan suppressed a smirk as he sipped his drink from a quiet corner. He already knew the truth. The deal was hanging by a thread, and Jeff was bluffing. The first strike came in the form of a letter to the tech company's board of directors. Dylan exercised his shareholder rights to block the sale of his shares, citing concerns about Jeff's financial stability. The response was swift. Jeff called Dylan the next day, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. Dylan, buddy, I hear you've been meddling with my deal. Meddling? Dylan replied coolly. I'm protecting my investment. Your track record isn't exactly inspiring confidence. Jeff's tone shifted to pleading. Come on, man. This is business. Let's work something out. Funny, Dylan said, his voice ice cold. I don't remember you being so eager to negotiate when you were stealing my wife. The line went silent for a moment before Jeff barked. You're making a mistake, Dylan. No, Dylan replied calmly. You did. Dylan didn't stop there. He compiled all the evidence of Jeff's shady dealings and sent it anonymously to the investors backing the resort project. Within days, rumors began circulating about Jeff's financial troubles, and key investors started pulling out. Evelyn, meanwhile, was starting to feel the pinch. The lavish lifestyle she had envisioned with Jeff was quickly unraveling. One afternoon, she called Dylan. Dylan, we need to talk, she said, her tone hesitant. Do we? Dylan replied, barely masking his disdain. Please, she said. I need help. Help? Dylan repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. Last I checked, you didn't need me. Remember? I'm just a boring loser. Evelyn was silent for a moment before whispering. I made a mistake. Dylan let out a bitter laugh. Oh, Evelyn, that's the understatement of the century. But here's the thing, you made your choice. Now you get to live with it. He hung up, his heart pounding with a mix of triumph and residual pain. The final blow came when Dylan confronted Jeff in person. They crossed paths at a business conference, where Jeff was trying to salvage what was left of his reputation. Jeff, Dylan said, approaching him with a calm that belied the storm brewing inside. Jeff turned, his expression hardening. What do you want? Just wanted to see how you're holding up, Dylan said, his voice casual. Heard your resort deal fell through. Tough break. Jeff glared at him. You think this is funny? You ruined me. No, Dylan said, stepping closer. You ruined yourself. I just held up a mirror. Jeff clenched his fist but said nothing, his jaw tightening. One more thing, Dylan added, leaning in. Evelyn? She's not coming back to me, but she's sure as hell not sticking with you either. Looks like you both get to enjoy the mess you made. By the time Dylan walked away, he felt lighter than he had in months. The revenge wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming his power and proving to himself that he wasn't the weak, boring loser they had painted him to be. For the first time since Evelyn's betrayal, Dylan smiled. The storm was over, and he was ready to rebuild. Not for her, not for revenge, but for himself and his kids. Dylan stepped into the courthouse with his lawyer, Sam, beside him. The air was heavy with tension, the kind that comes before a storm. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was the final chapter in dismantling the facade Evelyn and Jeff had built. You ready for this? Sam asked as they paused outside the courtroom doors. Dylan nodded, his face a mask of calm. Let's finish this. Inside, Evelyn sat stiffly at the defendant's table, her once confident demeanor replaced by unease. Jeff was conspicuously absent, no doubt too busy trying to salvage what was left of his crumbling empire. The proceedings began with Dylan's team presenting a carefully compiled case. Photographs, emails, and witness statements painted a damning picture of Evelyn's neglect and Jeff's financial instability. Mr. Dawson, the judge addressed Dylan after the first hour of testimony. Why do you believe full custody is in the best interest of your children? Dylan stood, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Your Honor, my kids have already suffered enough. My ex-wife abandoned them without hesitation. She chose her new life over her responsibilities as a mother. I've been their constant, the one they can rely on. They deserve stability, and I intend to provide it. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact. Her lawyer made a half-hearted attempt to counter Dylan's claims, but the evidence was overwhelming. By the end of the day, the judge ruled in Dylan's favor. Custody of Alex and Riley Dawson is awarded to their father, Michael Dawson. Ms. Evelyn Dawson is granted supervised visitation rights, to be reviewed after 6 months. Evelyn's face crumpled as the gavel struck. Dylan didn't revel in her pain, but he felt a deep sense of justice. As Dylan exited the courthouse, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Tony, his private investigator. Jeff's investors are jumping ship. Looks like the resort deal is officially dead. Dylan smirked, tucking his phone back into his pocket. The dominoes were falling just as he'd planned. The fallout for Jeff was swift and brutal. Dylan had anonymously leaked Jeff's fraudulent dealings to the press, ensuring that his reputation in the business world was irreparably damaged. His resort project collapsed, investors sued, and creditors came knocking. Jeff's once lavish lifestyle was reduced to ashes. Evelyn wasn't spared either. With no financial support from Jeff and mounting debts from her reckless spending, she found herself scrambling to stay afloat. The freedom she had sought turned out to be a lonely, hollow existence. One rainy evening, Dylan was in the kitchen helping Riley with her homework when the doorbell rang. He glanced at the clock, 9:15 p.m. I'll get it, Alex said, rising from the couch. A moment later, Alex called out, Dad, it's Mom. Dylan froze. Riley looked up at him, her face a mix of curiosity and dread. Stay here, Dylan said, his voice firm as he walked to the door. Evelyn stood on the porch, drenched from the rain. Her hair clung to her face, and her clothes were soaked through. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had once declared her independence with such cruelty. Dylan, she began, her voice trembling. Can we talk? Dylan stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. He crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. What do you want, Evelyn? I made a mistake, she said, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought Jeff would take care of me, but he's gone. I have nothing. Dylan raised an eyebrow. And this concerns me how? Evelyn's lip quivered. I need your help. For the kids. For us. Dylan let out a bitter laugh. Us? Evelyn, there is no us. You destroyed that when you left me for Jeff. Remember the divorce papers? The smug look on your face? The part where you call me a loser? You can't just show up here now and expect me to save you. I was wrong, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I was stupid, selfish. I see that now. Please, Dylan. I'll do anything to make it right. Dylan's gaze hardened. You think a few tears and an apology can undo everything? Do you have any idea what you put me through? What you put our kids through? Evelyn fell silent, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Look, Dylan continued, his tone firm but not cruel. I'll always make sure the kids are taken care of. But you're on your own. That's the life you chose. It's time you live with it. Evelyn nodded slowly, her defeat palpable. Without another word, she turned and walked back into the rain. Inside, Riley and Alex were waiting anxiously. What did she want? Alex asked. To apologize, Dylan said simply. Riley frowned. Are you going to forgive her? Dylan hesitated before answering. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I'm not letting her back into our lives the way she wants. She needs to figure out her own mess. Alex nodded approvingly. Good. She doesn't deserve it. Dylan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. We're going to be okay. All of us. Together. As the rain continued to pour outside, Dylan felt a sense of closure. This wasn't just the end of Evelyn's chapter in his life. It was the beginning of something new. For him, for his kids, and for the future they were rebuilding together. The storm raged outside, the wind whipping rain against the windows as Dylan settled into his armchair, a steaming mug of tea in hand. He was reviewing paperwork for a new business venture when the doorbell rang. The persistent chime echoed through the quiet house. Who could that be at this hour? He muttered to himself, setting down the mug and standing. Riley peeked out from her room. Dad, do you want me to check? No, stay upstairs, Dylan said firmly. I've got it. He opened the door to find Evelyn standing there, drenched and trembling. Her hair was plastered to her face, and her designer coat hung limp, soaked through. Mascara streaked her cheeks, her once proud appearance now a shadow of itself. Dylan, she said, her voice breaking. Please, I need to talk to you. Dylan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. The cold rain splashed onto his bare feet, but he didn't move. What are you doing here, Evelyn? He asked, his tone flat. I made a mistake, she blurted, tears mixing with the rain. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought Jeff would take care of me. I thought I wanted something else, but I was wrong. Dylan's eyes narrowed. You didn't make a mistake, Evelyn. You made a choice. You chose to leave me, to leave this family. You chose to humiliate me. And now you think you can just walk back into my life? Evelyn fell to her knees on the porch, her sobs muffled by the pounding rain. Please, Dylan. I'll do anything. I'll fix it. I'll prove to you I've changed. Dylan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Fix it? Evelyn, this isn't something you can fix. You didn't just hurt me. You shattered everything we built together. For what? A man who used you and then discarded you the moment things got tough. Her hands reached for him, but Dylan stepped back. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered, her voice trembling. I thought I deserved more. I thought I was missing out. And now you realize what you lost, Dylan said sharply. But it's too late, Evelyn. The kids and I have moved on. We're building a new life, a better one. Without you. Evelyn's sobs grew louder, her desperation palpable. The kids need their mother, she pleaded. They can't hate me forever. Please, let me come back. Let me try to be there for them. Dylan's jaw clenched. The kids don't need a mother who abandons them. They needed you when you walked out that door with Jeff. When you left me with nothing but divorce papers and laughed in my face. They needed you then. Now, they're doing just fine without you. I'll make it right, Evelyn said, her voice cracking. I'll go to therapy. I'll apologize to them. I'll do whatever it takes. You think a few apologies can erase what you've done? Dylan snapped, his voice rising. Do you have any idea how many nights I stayed up trying to figure out how to keep this family together while you were off playing house with Jeff? You made your bed, Evelyn. Now lie in it. Evelyn's hands trembled as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a photograph. It was of their family, taken years ago during a camping trip. She held it up to Dylan. This, she said, her voice barely audible. This is what I want back. Us. Our family. Dylan stared at the photo for a long moment before sighing deeply. Evelyn, that family doesn't exist anymore. You destroyed it the moment you chose him over us. You don't get to just press rewind. I was stupid, Evelyn admitted. I was selfish and blind. I see that now. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, to the kids. Just please don't shut me out completely. Dylan shook his head. You shut yourself out, Evelyn. And now you have to live with that. He turned his hand on the door, but her voice stopped him. Dylan, please. He looked back, his expression resolute. I'm done, Evelyn. Done with you. Your lies, your games. The kids, and I deserve better. I deserve better. So no, I'm not taking you back. I'm not giving you another chance. Evelyn broke down completely, her sobs echoing in the night. But Dylan didn't waver. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Riley met him at the bottom of the stairs, her face pale. Dad, is Mom okay? Dylan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She'll be fine, sweetheart. She just needs to figure things out for herself. But we're going to be okay. I promise. Alex appeared in the hallway, his arms crossed. Did she ask to come back? Dylan nodded. She did. You didn't let her? Did you? Alex asked, his voice tinged with anger. No, Dylan said firmly. She made her choice, and now she has to live with it. We're moving forward. Just the three of us? Alex's tense posture relaxed slightly, and he gave his father a small nod. Good. As the rain continued to pour outside, Dylan sat back down at the kitchen table with his kids. They talked about school, work, and plans for the weekend. For the first time in a long while, Dylan felt at peace. He had faced his past, confronted the pain, and made a decision to move forward. Evelyn's begging had no power over him anymore. The life he was building, with his children and on his own terms, was his true victory. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Dylan stirred his coffee in the kitchen. Riley sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through her phone, while Alex was busy packing his duffel bag for his soccer game. The house buzzed with a warmth that had been absent for years. Dad, are you coming to the game tonight? Alex asked, glancing over his shoulder. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Dylan replied, smiling. He sipped his coffee, savoring the moment. The chaos that had once consumed his life was a distant memory, replaced by a steady, fulfilling rhythm. Dylan's journey toward rebuilding hadn't been easy. After Evelyn's desperate plea that rainy night, he'd spent weeks untangling his emotions. Anger and betrayal still lingered, but he chose not to let them define him. Instead, he focused on his kids and his own personal growth. It started with small steps, getting back into shape, reconnecting with old friends, and revisiting hobbies he'd abandoned years ago. He took up woodworking, a pastime he'd loved as a young man, and began crafting furniture in his garage. The work was meditative, giving him a sense of purpose beyond the office and parenting. One Saturday afternoon, Dylan was sanding a table leg when Tony, his old college buddy, dropped by. Man, this is impressive, Tony said, running a hand over the smooth surface. You've got talent. Thanks, Dylan said, setting down the sander. It's been a good distraction. Tony leaned against the workbench, a grin spreading across his face. Distraction, huh? You ever think about selling these? Could be a nice little side hustle. Dylan shrugged. Maybe. For now, it's just for me. But the idea stuck. Within months, Dylan had turned his garage into a small business, selling handcrafted furniture online. Orders poured in, and for the first time in years, he felt a spark of excitement about the future. Amid his personal transformation, Dylan found himself reconnecting with someone unexpected. Lauren, a kind-hearted woman he'd met through Riley's school. She was a widowed mother of one, her son in the same grade as Riley. Their interaction started casually, brief conversations at school events or over coffee during parent-teacher meetings. One evening, as they stood on the sidelines of a soccer game, Lauren turned to Dylan with a smile. You know, she said, I think our kids are plotting to set us up. Dylan chuckled. Wouldn't surprise me. Alex has been dropping hints for weeks. Lauren's laugh was warm, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Well, if they're going to all this trouble, maybe we should help them out. Their first date was at a local cafe, a simple and comfortable setting that matched their easygoing dynamic. Over cups of coffee, They shared stories about their lives, her struggles as a single mother, his journey through betrayal and healing. "I admire you," Lauren said, her gaze sincere. "What you've been through, it would have broken a lot of people. But here you are, stronger than ever." Dylan smiled, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "I guess I realized I had two choices: stay stuck in the past or build something better." From that day forward, their connection deepened. Lauren brought a lightness to Dylan's life, a sense of partnership he hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just a new chapter, she was a whole new book. Meanwhile, Evelyn's life had taken a much darker turn. Jeff's betrayal had left her in financial and emotional ruin. She tried to rebuild, taking on a series of dead-end jobs and moving into a cramped apartment, but her bitterness consumed her. One afternoon, as Dylan was picking Riley up from school, he spotted Evelyn waiting outside the gates. Her face was drawn, and her once polished appearance was gone. Riley stiffened in the passenger seat. "Do you want me to stop?" Dylan asked. Riley shook her head. "No, keep driving." Dylan did as she asked, but his chest ached as he caught Evelyn's forlorn expression in the rearview mirror. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Years passed, and Dylan's life flourished. His business thrived, his relationship with Lauren blossomed, and Alex and Riley grew into confident, well-adjusted young adults. At Alex's high school graduation, Lauren stood by Dylan's side, her arm linked with his as they watched Alex accept his diploma. "You did a great job with them," Lauren whispered. "We did," Dylan corrected, his voice filled with gratitude. Later that evening, as they toasted to Alex's success, Dylan reflected on how far he'd come. Evelyn, on the other hand, remained an outsider. She occasionally sent messages to the kids, but their responses were polite and distant. The relationship she had sacrificed everything for had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but regret. One day, she showed up at Dylan's furniture shop, her face lined with exhaustion. "Dylan," she began, her voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" Dylan looked up from his workbench, his expression calm but unreadable. "There's nothing left to talk about, Evelyn. You made your choices. I've moved on." She nodded slowly, her eyes welling up. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." "I appreciate that," Dylan said, turning back to his work. "But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. Take care of yourself, Evelyn." The best revenge, Dylan realized, wasn't watching Evelyn suffer. It was thriving in her absence. His life was full of love, laughter, and purpose. He had rebuilt everything she tried to destroy, and he'd done it on his own terms. Turns out, Dylan often joked to friends, "Losing her was the best gift she ever gave me." And as he walked into the next chapter of his life, hand in hand with Lauren, Dylan knew he had finally found the happiness he deserved.